August 12, 2025. The Gulf of Mexico burns under a storm. For months, cartel ships have been weaving through the waves, transporting billions of dollars worth of chemicals from jungle labs to the open sea. That morning, the United States decided to put an end to that. From the deck of the USS Arleigh Burke, the U.S. Navy prepares for a two-front war. Above, P-8 Poseidons and MQ-9 Reapers scan the horizon. Below, MH-60R Seahawks, armed with GAU-17 machine guns, circle the black water. At 3:40 a.m., 12 cartel ships break formation, escorting a cargo ship carrying more than 3 metric tons of fentanyl precursors, about 6,614 pounds. The destroyer's SPY-1D radar lights up. Harpoon missiles are activated. The seas are rough. But the mission doesn't stop there. 15 miles inland, U.S. Navy SEALs advance through jungle toward a concrete fortress hiding $5 billion of drugs. 2 battlefields, 1 night. The question is simple. Can technology crush an empire built on chaos? And tell us, if you were in command, would you attack the sea first or the shore first? Comment number 1 below if you're ready to go to war. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It's 2:15 a.m. The operations room goes red. 72 hours of P-8 Poseidon sorties and MQ-9 Reaper runs have finally stitched the picture together. Above them, a U-2 Dragon Lady sends down one last strip of imagery. Signals intelligence logs 120 encrypted handoffs tied to a single hull. This is not commerce. This is raw supply. For an industry of poison. The operations commander leans over the digital chart. The electronic warfare officer keys the AN/SLQ32 on the USS Arleigh Burke. Manifests and pallet scans spell it out. 1 to 3 metric tons of fentanyl precursor chemicals, 50 to 200 kilograms of packaged cocaine, and several metric tons of bulk methamphetamine, hidden under false decks. Estimated street value, up to $500 million. Those numbers land like a punch. A tracker rides under the keel. Phone dumps, GPS trails, and banking leads triangulate the same corridor. If that ship slips away, every lab on shore gets weeks of feedstock. If it's stopped, authorities seize chemicals, ledgers, and transaction chains that name suppliers and money managers. Orders harden in the room. MQ-9 drones will shadow the convoy. MH-60R Seahawks stand by on deck. GAU-17 miniguns hot. RHIBs loaded with boarding teams will launch under an electronic warfare umbrella. If escorts escalate, Harpoon anti-ship missiles and SM-6 interceptors are prepped to respond. The mission is surgical and absolute. Take the cargo, take the records, shut the artery feeding the jungle labs. It is a held breath before the strike, like watching a fuse crawl toward a powder keg. If one ship carries that load of precursors and drugs, how does that change what you feel about the fight against cartels? Is stopping a ship at sea cleaner than striking on shore? Or does it simply push the war into darker places? Tell the channel what you think. It's 2:30 a.m. The ocean goes quiet. The USS Arleigh Burke moves in blackout. Radar off. Hull slices through liquid ink. 70 miles north, a P-8 Poseidon circles slow. Sensors peeling back the night, layer by layer. Every blip on the screen, every spark of radio noise, whispers a story beyond the horizon. Inside the command room, the electronic warfare officer activates the AN/SLQ32 suite, one of the Navy's sharpest ears. It could catch a signal as faint as a cigarette lighter from 20 miles away. Across the screens, bursts of transmissions flare and vanish, like fireflies trapped in glass. Then a pattern forms, 3 escort vessels pinging in coded bursts, frequencies linked to cartel jammers from Eastern Europe. The data storm grows heavier. Power readings spike. Diesel engines run hot, close to overload. Satellite relays confirm a formation taking shape. More than a dozen vessels preparing to move together. Collectively, they carry almost 2,000 gallons of chemical fuel, spare engines, and munitions. Enough to sustain a small private army. The analysts do not see ships anymore. They see arteries, pumping money, drugs, and violence through a single maritime heart. Then the order comes, and calm but final. Maintain electronic silence, track everything that breathes. To the sailors, it feels like holding a thunderstorm in a glass jar. One wrong move, and the glass will break. If you could hear the enemy's heartbeat in the dark, what would you do? Strike first or wait for that sound to stop? Tell the channel what you think. At 3:40 a.m., the silence shattered. Radar operators on the destroyer USS Arleigh Burke saw a cluster of contacts bloom across the screen. 12 fast boats, no running lights, moving at 50 knots through the black water. Behind them crawled a heavy cargo vessel, slow, wide, built to look harmless. The decoy was working. Chaos in front, fortune behind. Inside the Combat Information Center, the room glowed red. Orders flowed like electricity through a circuit. The SPY-1D radar swept the horizon, its invisible beam cutting through the dark. The ANSLQ-32 electronic warfare suite came alive. It jammed every hostile signal in range, turning the air into static. To the cartel crews, it was as if the ocean itself had gone blind. The Arleigh Burke surged to 30 knots. Above it, two MH-60R Seahawks cut low across the waves, each one armed with twin GAU-17 miniguns, spinning fast enough to shred metal. Below, RHIB boats carried Navy SEALs, their engines muffled, their goggles green under the night sky. They were moving straight toward a convoy carrying more than 3 tons of fentanyl precursors, enough to make 1 billion doses, enough to poison a continent. At 3:46 a.m., the first cartel boat opened fire. Tracers zipped across the water like burning comets. The destroyer answered. Its phalanx CIWS rotated and screamed to life. 6 barrels spitting 20mm rounds at 4,500 per minute. The first burst turned the attacker into a fireball. One flash, then nothing. Another fast boat fired an old RPG-7. It exploded short, showering the waves with sparks. A Seahawk fired back with a single Hellfire missile. The impact hit like lightning. The sea glowed orange, then fell silent again. The SEAL teams pressed forward through the chaos. At 4:02 a.m., grappling hooks hit steel. Within 30 seconds, operators were on deck, clearing corners, moving fast and clean. They found crates labeled industrial cleaning solvents. Inside, plastic drums of NPP and ANPP, the main precursors for fentanyl. Street value, $480 million. Below deck, engineers found a hidden lab. Polished tanks, chemical pumps, heating units. A floating factory. It wasn't just smuggling anymore. It was production at sea. A mobile refinery that could make thousands of pills before touching land. On radar, a new threat appeared. A small aircraft flying low at 300 feet. Speed, 220 knots. A scout plane. The Aegis combat system locked on and jammed it clean off the map. The plane vanished, blind and lost. By 4:28 a.m., the sea went still again. 3 enemy boats destroyed, 7 captured, 44 cartel crew detained, over 3.6 tons of precursors seized, 1.2 tons of crystal meth recovered, hundreds of kilos of cocaine. A single night erased more than $700 million in cartel revenue. As dawn rose over the Gulf, the water was quiet. Smoke drifted. Oil slicks shimmered like bruises on the surface. Sailors said the smell of burned diesel stayed in their clothes for days. They called it Operation Black Current. The night the ocean became a weapon. The destroyer's crew stood on deck, watching the sun bleed across the horizon. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like silence after thunder. The ocean had spoken, and the world would listen. But far away in the Pentagon War Room, new coordinates flashed red on the map. The trail of money and blood led inland, into the jungle. A fortress hidden beneath the trees. The battle on the sea was over. The war on land was about to begin. At 5:10 a.m., the jungle came alive. From miles offshore, the glow of the burning convoy still flickered on the horizon. But inland, under the canopy, another battle was waiting to begin. 2 RHIB boats slipped through the surf, engines barely whispering. 24 Navy SEALs moved through chest-high water, rifles raised, goggles green. They were heading for the jungle compound, coordinates traced from the ship's captured ledgers. The target was buried 15 miles inland, a fortress of steel and concrete hidden beneath trees so thick even satellites struggled to see through. By 5:32 a.m., The teams made landfall. They split into two elements, Alpha and Ghost. Each man carried 40 pounds of gear, suppressed M4 carbines, breaching charges, handheld jammers, and compact drones small enough to fit in a pocket. Overhead, a single MQ-9 Reaper orbited at 25,000 feet, relaying infrared video in real time. Through the canopy, the compound appeared, walls of reinforced concrete, 8 guard towers, and a heat signature that pulsed like a furnace. This was no lab. It was a fortress with its own power grid, its own comm towers, and hundreds of barrels of chemical precursors stacked in rows. Analysts estimated the stockpile could produce $5 billion worth of fentanyl, enough to kill millions if it ever crossed the border. At 5:48 a.m., the first shots cracked. Cartel sentries spotted the shimmer of movement and opened fire with M60s. The air filled with tracer rounds, red lines cutting through the trees. The SEALs answered with suppressed bursts, short, controlled, precise. One operator launched a small Black Hornet drone, no bigger than a hand. It hovered over the compound, mapping enemy movement and thermal. The feed revealed 30 hostiles inside, another dozen manning the towers. Then came the breach. Explosive tape charges, timed to milliseconds, ripped open the perimeter gate. Flashbangs followed. Light and thunder rolled through the trees. Team Alpha stormed the main building, room by room, securing the lab floor. They found stainless tanks still hot, rows of pill presses still running. In the corner, crates stamped with cereals from Chinese industrial suppliers. Everything they needed to flood a continent was here. Outside, Team Ghost fought toward the comm tower. Cartel reinforcements poured in on motorbikes and trucks, headlights slicing through fog. One truck mounted a .50 caliber machine gun. Old, rusty, but deadly. A single airstrike call was made. 30 seconds later, a GBU-54 laser-guided bomb dropped from 15,000 feet. Impact precise within 3 feet. The explosion folded the tower like paper. By 6:12 a.m., the compound was burning. Secondary blasts rippled through the forest as chemical tanks ignited. Orange fire climbed above the canopy, lighting up the dawn. The mission had lasted 40 minutes. 40 minutes to erase a drug empire that took 10 years to build. As the SEALs pulled back to the extraction zone, they passed what was left. Burned steel, cracked barrels, and the faint smell of chemicals mixing with rain. For a moment, the jungle looked alive again. Steam rose from the ground. Birds began to call. Nature was taking back what greed had stolen. Behind them, the MQ-9's camera caught the last frame, a plume of white smoke curling into the sky like the ghost of an empire fading. The cost was staggering. In one night, over $1.2 billion in production equipment and narcotics were destroyed. 54 enemy combatants neutralized. 0 American casualties. The strike crippled the Sinaloa supply network for 6 months. But victory came with questions. How far could the United States go before the line between war and policing disappeared? If a jungle lab could be hit like a military base, what came next? And when a nation fights cartels with guided bombs and satellites, is it defense or domination? Tell the channel what you think. At 7 a.m., the smoke still rose above the jungle. From orbit, the satellite feed looked like a scar, 3 square miles of burned earth where the fortress once stood. Thermal images showed nothing but twisted metal and collapsed tanks. Every chemical drum, every mixing tower, gone. In less than 1 hour, over $1.2 billion in narcotics infrastructure had been erased. 3 tons of precursor chemicals destroyed. More than 50 cartel fighters confirmed dead. The rest vanished into the trees. By mid-morning, U.S. Navy analysts aboard the USS Arleigh Burke reviewed the footage. The strike was clean. No civilian casualties. No friendly fire. The mission was surgical, like cutting a tumor with a laser. In Mexico City, the government called it an act of sovereignty violation. But off the record, intelligence officials whispered relief. For the first time in years, the flow of fentanyl slowed to a trickle. DEA data later showed a 65% drop in supply within 30 days. A single night had shifted an entire economy of crime. Yet the silence that followed was heavy. For every destroyed lab, another waited in the shadows. Money moves faster than missiles, and empires built on drugs don't die, they mutate. As night fell, the Pentagon's screens went dark one by one. The coordinates faded, but deep in the war room, planners already traced new routes, new coastlines, new targets. One operation ended, another waited. Because wars like this don't end with victory. They end when there's no one left to fight. If ending a drug empire takes missiles, satellites, and soldiers, what does that say about the world we live in? Is this justice or just survival? Tell the channel what you think. When the smoke fades and the noise dies down, what remains is the question we rarely ask. What do these battles really mean? The strike on the Gulf wasn't just about firepower. It was about information, precision, and the will to act. In less than one night, satellites, drones, and destroyers worked together like gears in a single machine. It showed what modern warfare has become, a fusion of data and discipline, of steel and silence. But beyond the technology lies something deeper. The reminder that corruption, greed, and addiction don't live in one country. They live in all of us. Every pill, every dollar, every demand feeds the same dark industry. And for every fortress burned, there's another being built, somewhere we can't see yet. The lesson is simple but heavy. Power means nothing without purpose. Precision means nothing without restraint. And war, even when it feels clean, always leaves scars you can't see on a map. If this story made you stop for a second to think about what power costs, what protection means, and what we're all fighting for, then it's done its job. If you've watched until this point, drop the number 1 in the comments. Let me know you're still here. And if you want more deep breakdowns of the hidden wars shaping our world, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us again when the next story unfolds. Because history doesn't end. It just waits for the next mission. Top of form, bottom of form,